Hello, everybody. Excuse the very loud humming of my computer. Yeah, I know it's been a while. It's been, geez, over a month, I think, since the last one. And yeah, I mean, there's really no excuse aside from the fact that I just didn't feel like filming anything extra. I mean, you could argue that I was working more on my novel in more of a direct focus, I guess, than previous kind of where I just had kind of little short bursts of intense kind of laboring over it. But now I've been more consistently going back and forth with an editor. This is the one that's called The Gospel According to Yule. Though I'm not 100% sure about that title yet, but we'll see about how that turns out. But yeah, and I also want to make some other videos like more less focused on the book reviews because I feel like the whole gamut with doing this whole uh, just literary reviews, I think it's a little bit exhausting, especially when you see the how saturated, not necessarily saturated, but there's like a few really good people that do this one, and there's also other matters of like, oh well, like a lot of people aren't reading these days, especially like Gen Z people aren't picking up books. It's just a lot harder to pick up books. So I feel like the audience I'm talking to is just kind of like preaching to the choir. Like I don't get the sense that what I'm saying to you guys is like you guys know that like about authors like Camus or Dostoevsky or Herman Hesse, but not the Gen Z's kind of need like kind of a little, I don't know, like a push, I guess, in the right direction with other stuff. So maybe, I don't know. I feel like I'm still gonna do them, I guess, just because I feel like it's a good, maybe even just for my own sake, just a review, just a kind of a retrospective, I suppose, on like what I thought about a book and see what other people think about it, because sometimes there aren't, I don't know, um, but yeah, like I said, I might not, or maybe I might be uploading at this logging rate that I am now, where it's like I might do 5 reviews in like less than a week, and then upload them intermittently or at the same time. And I don't have a schedule, like I don't have anything. But one point it was like a week. I think I was like pretty consistent for like a little bit. But here I am, almost 3 years on. I think doesn't feel like it was cliched kind of sentiment, but yeah, it does not feel like it's been this long. Um, but yeah, I do want to talk about, not waste your time. I will try to make another video where I'm just gonna do more ranty stuff, where I'm not without some maybe self-righteous kind of indignation, or just life stuff going on that I might just talk about more personal. But I will try to make some of your time worth it. In this one, I'm going to be talking about Albert Camus' The Fall, which came out in 1956. Um, and you guys already know about Camus. Um, so I'm not going to try to give anything more than kind of he was a French Algerian, or Algerian-born French author, philosopher, definitely. A big kind of he was kind of lumped into the same existentialist category as like Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir, but he actually disowned that term, and he later on in life, and he actually I believe he described his work more as absurdist. So, but don't quote me on that. Um, he definitely was, as Sartre described it, more of a humanist, I think, and you see that shine through his writing. Excuse me. But yeah, so the fall, it describes as the fall involves a so I had to read this twice. And I just read it again like a few months ago. So I wanted to do it while it's still fresh in my head, but and it's a very short work. It's only a short. It's like a it's listed as a novel here, but it feels like it's a short story because it's no more than maybe 3 to 4 hours read. It was like maybe, yeah, 150 pages, I want to say. But yeah, that it's so densely packed with a lot of stuff going on. So it concerns, the setting is very the driving force, I think, which is in Amsterdam, which I have not visited. I'd love to visit someday, definitely sometime before I die. Is one city I would like to go to, Amsterdam. And the has this very kind of loquacious character of the judge penitent named Clements, and his interlocutor, or no, his long confession is his monologue to a stranger that you don't nobody knows the name of the stranger, is another bar patron at this place in Amsterdam, and then he starts off on kind of starting off with the question of like what is the best way to like order a drink in a bar, and then he asks the this other stranger at the bar, and who is kind of strongly kind of uh, uh, similarities almost as a stand-in for the reader, because you feel like that everything that this judge penitent says to you is basically what he would say to like to the reader, confiding in their in that kind of terms. But yeah, so he's in this the name of the bar is Mexico City, which is a strange name for a bar. It's really weird because I thought that kind of threw me off, because I was like, that didn't sound like it necessarily like it like had an analogous kind of um anything to do with like Amsterdam. It kind of made me threw me off a little bit, but it's so he starts talking about the right way to order a drink, and then that spawns him off onto this great long um, conversation about very philosophical, waxing poetic and philosophical, and he talks about his career as a affluent defense lawyer, and he's talking about how he's the whole of his life he's been very concerned with like the unworthy, or like the marginalized, the less kind of seen of society, like the kind of underdogs, and that he's like I'm like he's talks about widows and orphans too, like that those were his the staple of his career, I think, is that was helping out people who could not help themselves, I guess. So um, then he starts talking about describing how another thing with the setting is that how all the concentric circles of Amsterdam resemble hell, um, especially in the kind of Dante-esque kind of inferno of hell. In that, um, and I always thought that, even when I first read that like 4 or 5 years ago, that part stuck with me, because I thought that it's his also his like an affinity, I guess, for lofty places is interesting, because he's like always talking about at least every so often he drops his or his he describes his love of being above people, and not necessarily in a superiority case, but because but he always has to be the one like that's on like these like great these like uh above um uh like high elevated views. And another reason why I'm so nervous about doing these book reviews, because I can't speak for goddamn because I cannot speak through one sentence without stuttering, and anyway. But that's probably because I need to do more. That's probably because the more I do, or the more less intermittently, I guess, if the interim between them, if I make that less stagnant, then I'll probably be able to do more of them, but I'll be able to do them more qualitatively rather than just whatever. Um, but then there goes that bad faith kind of argument, I guess. Anyway, so yeah, Clemens is a very hard to describe how he needs to be seen as like this hero of the story, and then he's like it's only just now that even then that he's like confiding to this stranger that he's seeing how duplicitous he really is, and he's like maybe I'm not as hot and as like as like the hero of my own narrative, because everything he says is like so he is like so he's like making himself out to be the sole character, main character, I guess, main character syndrome. Oh, no, just kidding. Of his own story, like the way he tells the story is very much like he's not holding anything back. There's like stuff that he talks about that's very shameful, like his depressing and shameful that he does, like um uh and then there's stuff that he talks about that's um not as self-deprecating and more just kind of I guess waxing him up, like I guess. Or so yeah, he talks about when he's on his way because he's from France, of course, these are and he talks about in Pont Royal in France, I believe that's Paris, I think, and he's talking about how when he comes home one night, late at night, he sees a woman that's dressed in black, assumably mourning over something, and then he sees her contemplating over a bridge, and he is apprehensive for a little bit, but then uh, he's wonders like what like who would be um like like looking so morose and like looking over this bridge, and then he like just kind of eventually just kind of like passes, and then he passes by and he's like, well, I'm just gonna not get involved, and then later, like right then, he hears like a doop, like a thud sound of her dropping into the river Seine, I believe. um that also kind of gives me the sound of the or that kind of also brings to mind the image of the girl of the river scene, like the unknown death mask of the river girl, which is later I think found out to be a hoax. But because I think Camus also commented on that, so that's one thing I do know off the top of my head, is that he said that girl was like a representative kind of melancholy of France or something like that. Which there was something to that mask of like the kind of the melancholy kind of dourness. And yeah, so he just walks by, and then he says that he didn't want to get involved because so he heard that the thud, but he also heard a scream like so yeah, he says that, quote, the silence that followed as the night stood suddenly still seemed interminable. I wanted to run, and yet I didn't move an inch. I was trembling, I believe, from cold and shock. So yeah, so I think the reason he didn't is because he didn't want to. He did genuinely fear for his own safety. So there's another instance of his, I guess, kind of a closeted, like a little bit of a hypocritical kind of nature to him, because he's saying like, oh well, I'm such a good guy. I look out for these disenfranchised people, widows and orphans. Yet at the same time, he cannot bring himself to just like get in you know, from either timidity or I'm not sure. But he is a definitely a interesting character, like an interesting character in the sense that there's so many different contradicting elements coming together in a kind of chaotic storm of like, um, makes it so um, such a engaging read, because you're reading it and then you're not really thinking of the words. That's why the plot wise, like the details are kind of lost on me. They usually are because I'm not like a detail heavy guy. I'm like a really big picture, like so big a picture guy. But this is like one of those things where I was drawn into just the way, like this, the way of being inhabited in this guy. Now, normally when you're with unreliable narrators in novels, you can get really kind of tired, fatigued of like, or like secondhand fatigued of like the headspace of being in, having to occupy that same monotone whatever, especially if it's like a really monotone kind of thing. um but in this, I felt like there was like never a dull moment like the whole entire time, even though like obviously like this isn't the healthiest kind of person to be, like not the most uh still like waters, I don't think. But yeah, so Clements then, he there's also another incident he talks about, which is a little more embarrassing, where he talks about being in traffic with a motorcycle behind him, and then I guess anybody who's knows anything about Europe traffic knows like how much of the motorcycles kind of make up, they contribute to a lot of the traffic there. There's like, like they weave in and out of traffic like kind of seamlessly. It's almost like a way of life, like the French motorcyclists. Or European in general. But yeah, so he talks about how he um, has a moment of humiliation at this hand of this motorcyclist who he is like trying to get him. He's beeping behind him while in traffic, and then he kind of tries to signaling him on, and then something happens in between those moments when something is instigated, and the motorcyclist gets really hot headed, and then starts uh, get throwing a punch at him, and then humiliated. Clemens eventually just kind of gives up and then goes home and kind of just like, um, but the so I think there's like a weird thing where on account of some weird principle, Clemens doesn't want to like get involved with the man and throw a punch at him. So yeah, then there's another part where he talks about the French Resistance era, which is obviously like a huge part of the Second World War, and this involved Clemens was a younger man during this would have been like what 15 years prior around in like the early 40s, and with Germany occupying like a lot of Europe and especially France too, like this kind of underground kind of resistance thing going on. um, and then I think what happens is that he he in his apartment he's like staying kind of in a safe little hovel, and like he's like wondering whether or not he should join or not, and then he says that the undertaking struck me as a little mad. I think especially that the underground action suited neither my temperament nor my preference for exposed heights. So there's that exposed heights things like this. It seemed to me that I was being asked to do some weaving in a cellar for days and nights on end, until some brutes should come and haul me into hiding, undo my weaving, and then drag me further into a cellar to beat me to death. So yeah, he clearly he thought that the whole plan of the resistance was stupid and that it was just going to involve like worthless toiling labor. So he ended up kind of ducking out of that. So you get the sense that he's not the most boldest person, or that he's not as charitable as he lets on. But there's so many different sides to him that he's just going on about. So he talks about, I think, going to North Africa, and then at some point he goes to Tunis, where he kind of settles down a little bit, and then when I want to say the Axis powers were kind of in some had some turf in North Africa, so he's like kind of like a little bit like kind of wandering around aimlessly like a chicken with his head cut off. So Clemens kind of goes around, and then but yeah, let's say, so obviously there's a lot of spoilers in this one, but he eventually finally talks about this famous painting. I want to say it's called the Ghent altarpiece. So it's called um, the Just Judges. So he's talking about his own identity as a judge penitent. So he's talking about this idea of like um, freedom, I guess, as a there's no, with an existentialist frame of mind, I guess there's no truth. I guess with the death of God, he's invoking Nietzsche. Obviously, there's no truth whatsoever. So he's living in a kind of um, perhaps why maybe Camus distanced himself from existentialism is because this guy could have been a kind of a almost a some kind of a persuasive yet ultimately ineffectual look or gaze into the eye of like what maybe this total kind of libertine is not the right word, but just complete no holds bar freedom, no objective rules, nothing whatsoever, just like do as thou wilt. And that this idea of just kind of trying to produce your own morality, I guess, or trying to impose your own morality, and thinking that maybe, oh, maybe I'm a coward here, or maybe I'm kind of, what's the word, unfaithful here, but maybe the next moment I'm just going to kind of dole out my own idea of what being a good man is, and that I'm going to be charitable on this next occasion. So yeah, he's very very uh tempestuous, I'd say. Anyway, but that is all I have for Albert Camus' The Fall. Yeah, and I'm in the middle of, I guess, if I'm for anyone interested, I'm in the middle of reading Zadie Smith's Autograph Man and the T.S. Eliot's The Way Sound. Although there's also, I think it's J. Because I did read the singular poem like some years ago, but I want to reread it with a collection of different poems in there interspersed there. So I think there's like, I think J. Edgar, the love song of J. Edgar Prufrock, and stuff like um, the hippopotamus, I think it's called. But yeah, there's a number of other things in there that I would like to eventually, when I'm done with it, obviously, review. Oh, and also this too. I'm gonna try to do this as well. The Beach by Alex Gunn. So yeah, yeah. If you have read The Fall by Albert Camus and you want to know what you think, yeah, just let me know what you think, and yeah, I will see you in the next one.